I'd like to call the meeting of the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to order and begin with roll call, please.
Excuse me.
Caught her by surprise.
A little tense up here right now. Dr. Beebe.
Present.
Dr. Beebe is present. Dr. Bofi.
Here.
Dr. Bofi is present. Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Mr. Garvey.
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Gio.
Here.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Harris. Present. Ms. Harris is present. Ms. Hill is absent. Dr. Moranti.
Present.
Dr. Moranti is present. Ms. Orange Jones.
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer.
Here.
Mr. Romer is present. And Ms. Smith.
Present.
Ms. Smith is present, and you do have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to begin our meeting by inviting two folks down to help us. The first with invocation will be Bill Brent from Northwestern State, and then the pledge to be given by Trasma. Is it Richard or Richard? Richard from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we pray that you will give us your gift of knowledge, that we might always make the best decisions for the good of all the school children in Louisiana. We pray that you give us the wisdom to know and define our tasks, the strength to build and refine our educational goals, and the courage to persevere as necessary. We ask for your direction that we might make unselfish decisions for those we serve. We pray that all who are assembled here have a safe journey home, and we thank you for all of your past and future blessings. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both for doing that. We also have had two members ask for personal privilege. I don't know if they wanted to do it particularly right now, but I'm going to start with Dr. Beebe, who I do know wanted to go right now. Dr. Beebe.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Romer. And I do want to acknowledge Mrs. Trasma Richard, who is attending UL at Lafayette. She's pursuing her doctorate credentials, and she is at this time shadowing St. Martin Parish School Board Central Office and me. And I'm sure she doesn't have her roller skates on today, but it's certainly an experience. So I just wanted to, and of course one of her responsibilities is to observe policymakers in action. So this was a wonderful opportunity because we had our joint meeting today with the Board of Regents and of course us as BESE. So I just simply wanted to acknowledge her and say welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Bofi.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment and congratulate Kira Orange Jones as being chosen as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people. She was selected for her work in leadership in New Orleans and the district she represents, and the work with the Recovery School District being one of the fastest improving urban districts in the country. And so this is so exciting. I know, I think it was my husband who found the article first, and then I started seeing it everywhere, but I understand some of the board members might not have known, and I just wanted to share this with you. I'm sure you guys are as proud of Kira as I am.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, just to let the board know, I did call Time Magazine. And the rest of us were number 101 through 110, but they only published through 100. John, you made the top 250, though. So, no, congratulations, Ms. Orange Jones. That's an amazing accomplishment, and congratulations to you. Next item, please.
Approval of the minutes?
Approval of the agenda.
Need a motion to approve the agenda.
I move.
There's a motion by Dr. Beebe, seconded by Ms. Smith. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Approval of the minutes of April 15, 2015. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second. Motion by Dr. Bofi, I believe it was seconded by Ms. Bradford. Any objection? Any discussion? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is consideration of executive session regarding the annual evaluation of the State Superintendent of Education.
Board will need a motion to go into executive session. It will require a roll call vote and requires a 2/3 affirmative vote for us to go into executive session. No votes will be taken in session. Any votes that need to be taken will be done in public. So could I have a motion to go into executive session? A motion by Ms. Smith, seconded by Ms. Bradford. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, sir. Dr. Beebe?
Yes.
Dr. Beebe votes yes. Dr. Bofi?
Yes.
Dr. Bofi votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio?
Yes.
Mr. Gio votes yes. Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Ms. Harris votes yes. Ms. Hill? Ms. Hill is absent. Dr. Moranti?
Yes.
Dr. Moranti votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones votes yes. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. And Mr. Romer?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. We will go into executive session now. I will remind once again that there will be no votes taken in session. Any votes that are required will be taken in public. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we go back into regular session.
A motion, and there's a second by Ms. Bofi. Any objection? Hearing none. Back in order. I'd like to recognize Dr. Bofi.
Okay. I move that the board, I need to announce that the State Superintendent of Education received a favorable evaluation, and I'd like to move to direct the BESE Executive Director to facilitate the establishment of a work group to consider modification of the evaluation framework and rating score for the rubric for the 2016 evaluation of the Louisiana State Superintendent of Education.
Seconded by Mr. Gio. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
So a report by the State Superintendent of Education.
Thank you. Members, first I want to acknowledge we've had new Superintendent Association elections, and Brian Lejeune from Jeff Davis Parish is with us. Brian, I believe you are the Vice President of the association. Congratulations this year. Hollis Milton, who many of you have come to know over the years, is our new president, and I look forward to working with Superintendent Milton and the rest of the association this year. Brian in particular has spent a lot of time in Baton Rouge recently advocating on a number of fronts and is a very effective advocate, and I look forward to working with him. Let me just say briefly, and I've mentioned this to you before, that one thing that gives me a lot of satisfaction is that, in my mind, we really set out at the start of this term to focus on 5 things. One is that every family has a quality choice and that we focus on low-achieving schools through the Recovery School District. We have, I believe in our time, set up a choice system that has now become common practice in our state. 2 is that we set our standards high and pin our expectations to expectations as high as anywhere in the country. I believe through our compromise we've stabilized our student standards situation, and we will be adopting Louisiana student standards that will guarantee that that goes on in perpetuity. 3, that we create a system of pathways to the post-secondary environment. And through the presentation this morning, you saw that we have completed now the framework for TOPS and TOPS Tech to align with AP and Jumpstart. 4th, that we create an early childhood system that is truly unified and promises a quality option to any family sending child care, pre-kindergarten, or Head Start. You've worked a lot on this in the last couple of days, and I believe we've reached a point of reconciliation on this. I know we have some further discussion of that this morning. And finally, 5th, that we have a quality teacher in every classroom. And we've done a lot to bring reconciliation to our Compass system, but we also are finalizing some work we're doing with our higher education environments and with our school systems such as St. Landry and Caddo Parish on our teacher preparation work, which I think is the most important aspect of educator of a quality workforce. And we do have some further discussions left over the course of the fall and winter on that issue. So members, I'm hoping to say to you that we have one more meeting prior to the election. Our board will then ultimately change, and there'll be a different set of people sitting here come January. But I hope you have satisfaction in the fact that those things that we really set out to do have by and large been done. And there's a lot more to do on all of them. There certainly is many more hours and years of work to do, but generally the things that we set out to achieve, we have achieved. So I thank you for that. I hope you take satisfaction in that. I hope you see all of these discussions as that kind of reconciliation. Today I know we're talking a little bit more about early childhood, and I believe we will have a further reconciliation of viewpoints today, I hope as well on that. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity to present and look forward to further discussions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Certainly would welcome any comment or question from any board member. Dr. Moranti.
I know as a board member, being able to now speak to those that were for and against standards, and to be able to say that we have a process in place, that just is such a good feeling. But I also want to acknowledge the leadership and also the work that was done with regard to this past session, because I think that we were able to come to a compromise, and I think it was politics at its best when both sides could leave saying that we won. In effect, our children really were the ones who were the winners, and I do know that the doors were not closed, and I do want to say that as a board member, I was very, very proud of our superintendent and the leadership that he took with this session, along with our other board members that were very instrumental in bringing about the success of this endeavor. So thank you, John. Thank you, board members, and I'm just grateful that we are able to say to our public we're still working hard on that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Appreciate those comments. Next item.
Next item is your board committee reports. Item 6.1, Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. Ms. Bradford.
On behalf of the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 2 and motions 4 through 16, noting that motions 7, 8, 9, 14, 15, 16 are notices of intent, and pulling motion 3 as a read.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Garvey. Is there any questions or comments on the items that were moved for approval? Is there any objection for the items that were moved for approval? Hearing no objections, those items are. Wait, Dr. Beebe, did you have?
I'm sorry, I wanted to recuse myself on motion 4 and academic goals.
Okay, that's duly noted. Any objection to the items that were moved for approval? Hearing none, those items are approved. Let's go to the pool items, I believe.
So that's motion 3. This is in regards to Bulletin 140, particularly sections 509, 703, 709, 705.
Is this in shorthand the early childhood issue?
Yes.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Garvey.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the motion as was originally recommended by the department, with the changes that have been passed out this morning to us. And that's the motion, but let me add, my understanding is that these changes will be presented to the public and can be presented now if anybody needs it, but they're fairly lengthy, and I'd like to speak to the motion too, also, if I get a second.
Sure. There's a motion to approve as amended. Is a second by Ms. Smith or Dr. Moranti. I think she wanted to second this one. I'm going to give her credit for it. Dr. Moranti did the second. I don't know if the superintendent. We certainly have 2 comment cards. I don't know if you want to enlighten. This was point of some discussion yesterday, and enlighten us as to your comfort and what are the results of these amendments.
Yes, I'm just going to walk through them just briefly, page by page, just to tell you what I think these accomplish. First, I want to thank all of the people who came to the table yesterday to advocate their positions. I heard a common story. As much as there was the impression, I think, coming into the meeting there was this big divide, I actually heard much more commonality. And I think that the main point was there is collaboration. We have to insist that it exists everywhere, and there's a lot of unknowns yet. So those are sort of the issues we've got to work through. These tried to codify the collaboration without creating boxy structures that locals can't navigate. And let me just give you an example. You could, for example, say, yes, you have to have 2 child care providers on every local council, and St. Martin Parish has to set up a local council for this and that. But what if in a given parish there aren't 2 child care providers? And that is a reality in many of our communities. So we have to address that local difference and create some flexibility. here's the way that these work. Number one, on Section 509, and you see number 2, this one basically says a center may appeal its rating to you, the board, if they have not been granted the observations that they need to receive a rating. And if they have tried diligently to get the lead agency to give them an observation, they can bring that forward as evidence that you must consider. That's totally fair and a reasonable thing. It also says that we will give you a list of any instance in which this has happened so that you're aware that that is the case, that a local center has not received a rating. Moving on in terms of enrollment, as was suggested, this requires now that the lead agency shall develop policies and procedures for enrollment that shall be submitted to the department and that shall be done in collaboration with child care, Head Start, and pre-kindergarten programs. It doesn't create a new structure that locks locals into something that is common from one place to the next, but it does create an obligation to engage and to be transparent, which I think we can all support. Finally, on the final page, you see the big one in the middle. This is a full acceptance of the original recommendation that there be a working group established to learn from the implementation this year. And finally, another insistence on collaboration. I think these are all very much in line with what was suggested. It's a practical, pragmatic way of approaching it. And I thank Mr. Garvey, you for being a broker and ensuring that there was this level of collaboration agreement. I also will finally say a couple of other thank yous. She said that yesterday I might not listen to her as much. I listen a lot to Melanie Bronfin. I think Melanie Bronfin is one of the smartest policy advocates I've ever worked with. She may get a lot of credit for being dogged, but I actually think that she's right most of the time also. And so I thank her for being the advocate that she is. And I want to thank our team, among others, Jenna Conway, Lisa Brochard, and Derek Little, who I don't see here, as well as Bridget Devlin and Aaron Bendeley, who put so much work into this specific issue as well. They have, over the last 3 or 4 years, taken what was a very, very broad piece of legislation and effectively unified the entire policy environment of child care, Head Start, public pre-kindergarten, and private pre-kindergarten. It's very complicated. It's hard to fit into a short newspaper article, so it doesn't get the sort of headlines that a charter school might get or a school system might get in its local paper. But they have done it quietly, with humility, and with total expertise, and we would never be there without them. So I thank them as well.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm going to call forward. We do have 2 speakers. I'll certainly allow members after these speakers to make comment if they wish. I'd like to call forward Melanie Bronfin, who, based on the last remarks, you may not want to speak. I don't know. And
it's Shane, only downhill from here, Melanie.
And Shane Riddle.
Mr. Chairman, I had repeated the famous phrase of, once you've made the sale, go home. But Melanie, Ms. Bronfin said that she did not issue enough thank yous, and she wanted to do a little bit of that. So I think
great.
That was all. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Melanie Bronfin with the Policy Institute for Children, and also I must say I think all of you who know me, and by now, whether you wanted to or not, you know me. I never miss an opportunity to speak. So with that in mind, no, I had just told Jim this morning that I really wanted the opportunity to testify, just to say thank you to you all, to the superintendent for working with all of us to craft these amendments that I think are so important and so critical. And to also just to thank you all as BESE members as well. I tell you, I sit here day after day, month after month, and marvel at your patience and your caring that you do for all the stakeholders, such as yesterday, where you listen to them all. It's hard for child care providers to come up here and testify. It frightens them. And your kind patience and listening and attention means so much to them, and I know to me as well. And I also wanted to take this opportunity. I don't know if you realize that when we only have 3 and maybe 5 minutes to speak and we're trying to get you to change something, we have to emphasize the negative, when in fact, I totally agree and wholeheartedly support much of what was, all of what was said yesterday by the school districts and all of those where collaboration is happening. It is, and it's wonderful, and it's very new and exciting to see at the local level. School district, all these disparate pieces of this system that have never worked together, coming together. It is a very exciting thing and very much a tribute to the superintendent and, as he mentioned, his hardworking early childhood team. All that we're doing with this is to make sure that continues and support it and encourage it. And so it is important to make sure that happens. And again, I just wanted this opportunity to thank you all so much. And as I mentioned, the journey of Act 3 implementation, I look forward to continue to work with all of y'all as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to personally thank you as well. You're a tremendous advocate for the kids. You do a tremendous job. I know we are going to need to watch this closely and make sure we continue to make changes where appropriate. But I want to thank you. I saw you in the legislature working very diligently, and you're a great advocate, as are others in the room. But I wanted to personally thank you for your effort as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This seemed like the best and appropriate place to submit a card on this item, although it has to deal with more of the general issues. But what I'd like to, I'm Shane Riddle. I'm the Legislative Political Director for the Louisiana Association of Educators. And on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Louisiana Association of Educators and Debbie Moe, our president, she couldn't be here today, we wanted to extend our thanks and gratitude to the BESE Board for working with us and other education stakeholders on issues such as the Minimum Foundation Program and the Common Core Standards, just to name a few. In March of this year, the LAE Board passed a resolution which included recommendations on the ways to best handle the Common Core issues, and Superintendent White reached out to us regarding those concerns and recommendations, and we applaud the outcomes thus far with the creation of the committees to do a comprehensive review of the Common Core standards. And also, along with other legislation that passed in this legislative session, to form the oversight of some of the process having to do with the Common Core standards. On the MFP, we thank the board for recognizing the importance of increasing the base per pupil allocation and advocating to fund the MFP in accordance with HCR 18, which was the MFP resolution that you sent over. Having said that, we may not always agree on some issues, but we are always willing and able to work with the BESE Board and the superintendent and continue an open dialogue to creating solutions that best benefit the students of Louisiana. So we really appreciate that. Thank you for working with us this year, and we'd like to continue that relationship. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Appreciate your work. We do have a motion. Dr. Beebe, yes.
No, I just wanted to say, yesterday we heard the concerns from the various speakers, and I know that oftentimes, I'm going to use this phrase, we don't see the forest for the trees, because the experience that I have had in St. Martin Parish with regard to Act 3 has been very positive. But the young lady from Jefferson Parish, and I would just ask Superintendent White to clarify, she referenced the challenges she has experienced to date with the fact that there's a parish council that they have to go through, not only work with the Jefferson Parish School Board, but with the parish council. So I'm just wanting to get an understanding, or have an understanding, because that would make it much more complicated with the different levels.
You know, I didn't follow up on that comment, but I think she meant the school board. I think that's what she meant, is that because the local school system is the lead agency, she meant now we have to work with the school board for the first time. Okay. I think that's what she meant.
So I thought it was the school board and then another.
No, I don't think so.
I didn't make the connection. I don't think so. I should have asked the question. But it is a very positive initiative, and I see that it can work. Now, I agree with some of the challenges presented, as it relates to the observations. I think in time, we'll identify those, and I want to encourage these individuals to come back and present the challenges, and we just have to work through those as we encounter them. And if you need me to be more specific, some advocated, having external reviewers from another district coming to, for example, St. Martin would partner with St. Landry, and then again, there might be a question of integrity, like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So those are some of the things that we need to continue the discussions to see if we can.
I agree, and fortunately, the policy that you've passed requires that we come back next year and rehash and see what worked and what didn't. So I totally agree.
I'll add one last thing. I know we want to move on. I too want to thank the superintendent's staff. If you look back at this legislation, this was an impossible task. I mean, this was an enormous task, and they've done a tremendous job. And I also want to thank the private providers who have come to the table to participate. They certainly didn't have to. Not everyone did, but a large number did participate in this process. And that speaks volumes for what they're ultimately trying to do, and I want to thank them for coming to the table as well. And I think we have work to continue to do, but I think this is a very good first step, and I appreciate Mr. Garvey working to make sure we added some things to hopefully make sure the continued oversight is done rigorously and vigorously. So thank you, Mr. Garvey. We do have a motion, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item, 6.2, Administration and Finance Committee. Mr. Gio.
On behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 63, pulling item 64.
There is a second, so we can approve with the items that are up. Is there any comment on the items that are up for approval? Now, we do have some cards here. Were they wanting on the item that's pulled?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is there any objection to the items that have been?
I need to recuse myself.
Dr. Beebe will recuse.
I need to recuse myself. Items 7 through 18.
Duly noted. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, so moved. We'll move to the pulled item now.
The pulled item is the motion 64, the verbal report regarding the 2015 regular legislative session. Dr. Beebe had some concerns.
Yes, and I'm passing out some literature. And basically, two individuals came to the table yesterday, and it sparked an interest, and I had a conversation in that there were suggestions that we are not appropriately funding our special needs population, and there's some simulations as you receive this packet. The first page is a copy of a resolution, and then the additional pages 2 and 3, there are simulations, and basically, as you see in red, there are some areas where these schools receive more money than they should have, or that they were entitled to, and one school in particular was underfunded. So I think, as we move forward, we need to be very conscious of our responsibilities, and I think we have an obligation to reconcile these miscalculations that occurred during the 14-15 school year. And I mean, the evidence is presented to you as attached. So I'm going to offer a motion that would ask you to approve the resolution that would put on record the reconciliations of miscalculations relative to special needs population. No, I don't want to. I want the board to act on this, approving the resolution that we reconcile these dollar amounts, because there are significant dollar amounts, and I know if I were that charter school in Calcasieu that was underfunded, I would be asking for the dollars. So Superintendent White, you can speak to it. I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
In fact, it was Senate Bill 267, which authorizes BESE, it's my understanding, to address this matter and reconcile.
Yeah.
But I do have a motion on the floor, and I need a second. I'm asking for a second.
We need a second to discuss it.
Second for
Okay, I'll
discussion.
second.
All right, second by Ms. Smith. Superintendent?
This is going to be a somewhat cumbersome explanation, but I'll try to simplify it. I know many of you are familiar with this. This is a question of the Constitution first. The Constitution charges BESE with annually calculating the cost and the legislature with appropriating funds on an equitable basis. That formula gives BESE the ability to determine how public schools are funded. That formula was passed by the legislature a year ago. It was not passed again this year. So the question is, what does the formula say about the funding of charter schools and the funding of district schools? And what the formula says is that however an underlying statute goes, so goes the funding of charter schools. The underlying statute used to say that the state is to take the weighted average funding for every child and send it to charter schools. Senator Claytor's legislation changes that to be the weighted, not average, but just the weighted funds per child. In other words, we're not treating charter school funding like it is the average kid. We're treating it like it is on an each kid basis, and that's something that we support, and that's a positive change. Now that nets greater funds for some charter schools and less funds for some school systems, greater funds for some school systems and less funds for some charter schools. The issue that I believe you're raising, I think, is what Mr. Richard raised, and I know you all were talking about that earlier, which is the timing of when this comes into effect. So there are two questions at hand. One, as a matter of the Constitution, does the fact that the legislature passed and BESE passed the formula last year mean that the formula changes when the statute it references changes? Or does it mean that the legislature passed a formula that reflects the statute that existed at that time? That's one question. Second, the law that you're referring to, or the bill that is being referred to, Senate Bill 207, that bill is not even a law yet. It's not been signed into law. So what I would suggest is that rather than the board making a decision about what is a question of constitutional law and legal construction, it's not a political question, it's not a policy question, it's just a legal construction question. You allow us to provide to you a legal opinion as to what the Constitution requires, how that relates to the underlying statute, and what that means in terms of funding. I would probably urge you not to pass a policy resolution that tries to dictate something that really is just a matter of the Constitution and the legal construction. We can, by the end of the week, provide you that legal opinion and the basis for it.
Okay, so as you've offered this explanation, because of the law as it was recently passed, that's what you're saying, that we can't go back and authorize the... Well,
I think what you're trying to do, tell me if I'm right, is you're trying to change the way that dollars are distributed 11/12 of the way through the year, right?
Well, these, according to the simulations presented here, we have an obligation to fund the dollar amounts based on the student enrollment. Yeah. And so if these students leave, the money should be directed to those systems where they go.
Well, but I think you're talking about are you talking about a retroactive redistribution?
Yes.
The law does not affect a retroactive condition. The law is meant for a prospective condition. I believe what Mr. Richard raised in his testimony yesterday was he is seeking for that prospective to take effect immediately. And I'm suggesting that this is a complicated question of legal construction, which is the following. One, the Constitution says that you are to calculate a cost annually, not on a 11 out of 12 months basis. Second, you passed a formula that includes a reference to a statute, and there is a constitutional question as to whether or not it refers to the statute that existed at that moment in time, or whether or not it refers to a statute that can change over time. Third, there's a question of the fact that this bill is not even a law yet. So I'm encouraging you that there's a legal puzzle, as with many laws, new laws, that needs to be figured out. I'm committing to you that we can provide a legal opinion from lawyers, not from policy people like me, by the end of the week.
Okay.
And that we should just be guided. The law gives us a roadmap, and we just have to follow the law. It's not a question of what we believe policy-wise. It's just a matter of following the law.
Okay. Well, I'm prepared to withdraw my motion, and then once you get the clarification, I would like this added to the next board agenda.
It's fine.
Not my call. That's fine.
So you're withdrawing your motion, and technically, the motion is still the body now has the motion. I don't think you can withdraw it yourself, but if there's no objection to her withdrawing is there any objection? No, I don't think so.
Well, then let's act on it, but I know the outcome. But I mean, I'm willing to get the interpretation,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
so that we can act appropriately. It's your call.
I'd make a substitute motion that we delay this issue until the next BESE meeting.
There's a substitute motion. Is there a second for that? There's a second for that. Any discussion or objection? Ms. Smith has a comment.
Just a quick.
Oh, and we do have cards, by the way, so I want to recognize those people as well.
So I agree. If the piece of legislation hasn't been signed, and we don't know if it could possibly be vetoed, and I do think there's some concern about when in the formula, the money is appropriated outside of the MFP formula. We do need a ruling on that. But it's my understanding, if I'm looking at this, what we're saying in the difference column is that is what they would be owed for the last MFP payment that would go to the school districts, not necessarily retroactive, but this next month. So that's not.
No,
that's not.
This is a mimeographed or Xeroxed copy of a table that the department passed out that indicates the annual, not 1 month, the annual difference. You would have to divide these by 12. So, for example, in the case of Madison Prep, you'd be talking about a $5,000 issue, and on down the line, not a $60,000 issue. I don't think anyone's arguing the principles here. I think Senator Claytor's bill was right. We supported it. Sean supported it. Scott supported it. Shane supported it. Everybody, Brian, everybody supported this bill. There's just a question of when it comes into effect. That's a legal question, as with any new law. I'll give you an opinion by Friday from our lawyers.
Thank you.
And I agree with Dr. Beebe. If we want to keep talking about it, we should keep talking about it.
I will invite I don't know if they still want to speak, but I certainly will recognize that we have had 3 cards turned in on this issue. Sean Fleming, Scott Richard, and Brian Lejeune.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'd like to clarify a few things that I don't think were accurate related to my understanding of what the law actually says and what the Constitution says. The current law does not say that y'all will distribute funds to a charter school or any school based on a weighted average. It says that charter schools will receive money on a per student basis. And Regulatory Statute 173995 in Section G does make a reference to a use of average for very restricted purposes. I think it's for facilities, and I don't have the reference in front of me. Maybe Mr. Richard does, but it never says to distribute the MFP based on a weighted average. And what y'all are faced with a couple of things. 3 years ago, Senate Concurrent Resolution 124 requested that y'all study the issue of inequity and resolve it as quickly as possible. That was 3 years ago, and 3 years of MFP task force meetings, which I appreciate y'all having. However, the data reflecting the inequity was never presented. Senator Claytor authored Senate Bill 267 out of frustration that the issue was never really put on the table. And the issue before y'all, and it's in, I was going to say black and white, but red and white now. And I'd like y'all to look at the Orleans Parish data, because I think it shows it fairly clearly. The Constitution says, y'all shall pass the MFP. The legislature may approve or disapprove, but cannot change it. And neither the legislature nor the governor can disrupt the allocations to local school systems. I'm not a lawyer. I know some of you are, but that's pretty clear to me. But and this is what we all agree with Superintendent White, and everyone who's been in the room understands very clearly. What y'all do on the front end is say, based on your student characteristics, we're going to give you so much money, because we know some kids cost more to educate. And I'll do the example, since there's 3 of us here, and show y'all what is going on and how y'all are not following the MFP in any school district except for Red River Parish. So someone asked me, how many kids does this impact? And my calculation was 718,600 students do not have the funding allocated to their schools based on the MFP. And so I'll do the demonstration, but the question you have to ask is, why did y'all pass the MFP? And you have to realize that why my parents and my council said, what difference does it make if y'all pass any MFP if on the back end you can change it? And that's what's happening. So I'll use simple numbers for you. Let's say I have a disability. Your MFP formula says the school gets 2.5 times the amount of money than a kid without a disability. So if it's $10,000 for a kid without a disability, $10,000 for a kid without a disability, $25,000 for the kid with a disability. There's $45,000 on this table to serve these 3 students. If one of the students without a disability goes to a choice program, a charter program, they do not take the $10,000 with them. They divide that $45,000 by 3, and they walk out the door with $15,000. Now, those are just numbers for demonstration, but these numbers show you the actual losses and gains of school systems. And in Orleans Parish, if you go in there and actually count their students relative to the MFP characteristics, what the department said is they ran these numbers on February 1, 2014 counts in the column labeled 1 and the column labeled 2, so a simulation of Senate Bill 267. I'll be honest, it was odd to me because, as Superintendent White's saying, why would they run those numbers if this bill doesn't take effect till next year? But it reflects at least a portion of what they should have been given based on the students enrolled in their schools. And so Orleans Parish should have received of state dollars $14.5 million and only got 12.8. And yet they still were charged with serving the students who were at risk, who were more poor, had more students with disabilities, more students, career and tech, gift talent, whatever the distribution was, relative to those students in the charter schools in that specific system. And so I think the question that Ms. Beebe is asking is, shouldn't we follow the MFP? And I would respectfully ask that y'all carefully consider whether y'all really respect the MFP that y'all passed. And yes, it didn't pass this year, but y'all got it passed last year, but y'all are basing all these allocations on these formulas that have been determined and vetted by this board and the legislature and the public. And yet, when I look at the numbers, and I've been looking at these numbers for quite a while, it doesn't add up. Thank you.
Appreciate
I'll
your
take
comments.
questions.
Mr. Richard.
Mr. Chairman, members of BESE, Scott Richard, Executive Director of the School Boards Association. Unfortunately, we're here today reiterating the testimony from yesterday. We have to insist as local school boards, as we advocate for dollars for public education, that the distribution of those dollars are done in an equitable manner by the department. And it's disingenuous for us to advocate and commit resources, as we've done successfully in partnership with BESE and the department over the last couple of years, to vigorously advocate for additional dollars for our students, especially our special education students who generate extra dollars, and have to worry about the distribution of those dollars being done correctly in accordance with the Constitution and in accordance with state statutes. The state statutes are very, very succinct as to when an average weighted amount is to be distributed, and the laws are very succinct as to when the actual weighted amount should follow the child from the department in their end-of-the-month payments in the MFP to any public school, all public schools. So on the heels of a legislative session where we work together to advocate for additional dollars, we have to come to this body, the BESE Board, and the state superintendent once again, and raise the issue and reiterate the importance of ensuring equity in the formula. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree with the MFP, whether we totally understand it or not, the ultimate goal of the formula is to provide equity in distribution of dollars. They're all tax dollars raised at the local level, the entire formula. It's just a redistribution of those dollars to all the various public schools in the state, driven by individual student characteristics to generate dollars and to distribute those dollars. Again, the ultimate goal is to provide equity. We, from the school board's perspective, felt like Senate Bill 267 was not even necessary this legislative session, because it simply raised the level of awareness again that an average amount to be distributed to certain schools is really not applicable, because the formula is very clear and the statutes are very clear. And again, we have to come to this body because you make those decisions. You are constitutionally bound by your oaths to follow the law, and that's what we're asking, that there be an attempt or consideration to address the issue that's been raised in the distribution of dollars prior to the end of this fiscal year, because that opportunity exists. There's one more payment that needs to be made. MFP payments to local school districts and LEAs across the state are adjusted accordingly. It's okay. It's common practice to adjust those distributions at this time of the year and at previous months' allocations at this time of the year. And that's all we're asking today, is to take a look at the equity in the formula, make sure that the dollars are being distributed equitably so all students get the dollars they deserve. And it's as simple as that. And there is no other avenue to advocate for that other than the legislature and here. So, we respectfully request you take a look at the issue and give it your utmost serious consideration. It's not about us versus them. It's not about grandstanding. It's not about political issues. This is a distribution question in the formula that needs to be addressed. The dollars are distributed by this department, this agency that you all oversee. There's various reports in every BESE meeting that addresses distribution of dollars and how those dollars are being spent. Just yesterday, we delved into the 70% instructional requirement for all LEAs, fiscal risk assessments, and we're asking that you take a look at what's happening here inside the department in regards to the distribution of those dollars, so they go and follow and are distributed to our most needy students so we can provide an adequate education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lejeune.
Brian Lejeune, Superintendent of Jeff Davis Parish Schools, Vice President of the Louisiana Superintendents Association. And again, I'm just here to advocate on behalf of the superintendents of the state to ask for your support in making this happen. As Mr. Richard and Mr. Fleming have pointed out, this is where we come to have this happen. So we would like for that to happen, and you look at and distribute those in the way that the laws will allow them to be distributed, and we would appreciate that. It would affect most of us, and it is affecting us now and has been affecting us for several years. I can speak to Jeff Davis Parish. We are losing $109,000 in next year's projected budget as we move forward in looking at this, and some of this is because of the payments to online schools and things like that, and we need that to be as equitable as possible so we lose as few dollars as possible, because the numbers don't exactly add up. We're not losing students, but we're losing money. And when you look at it, it's hard to figure out when your income continues to grow and what your locals put into the system continues to grow and you're still losing money. It's tough to figure all of that out. And we would just like for consideration and to make sure that we get the distribution that is legally allowed by the law, and we follow that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have one more speaker, Veronica Brooks.
Mr. Chairman, before
Why's she coming up? I'm sorry.
What, Dr. Moraney?
Before the gentleman leaves.
Oh, you have a question for one of them? I'm sorry. Sure, go ahead.
I really thank the three of you for the clarity that you just gave to us. I know as a board, as a member, I would definitely want to make sure that our policy is being followed equitably and that you're getting exactly what the formula stipulates. So if there is any way that you can work with our superintendent to bring that about so that at our next time we can make sure those distributions are done equitably, I'd really appreciate that as a board member that occurs. I don't think there's any I don't know how to quite say this, but I don't think there's any intent that formula would not be followed according to policy and statute. So I would want to be assured as a board member that that's happening. So if there's any way three of you would work with the superintendent to make sure this happens, I would certainly be happy about that.
Mr. Gill.
Just as a point of record, and I appreciate I appreciate your testimony and the superintendent's willingness to come back with a legal opinion. But for the record, I'm curious, Superintendent White, how many extra dollars have been allocated to special ed through the work of the MFP task force over the last 2 years?
If you include this year's, because of the task force recommendation, it'll end up being about $10 million.
Thank you.
Could I say something? But for those of us like Jeff Davis who don't have enough students to be part of that high-cost pool, we don't get all of that back. So I'm actually funding high-cost students without the money that other people receive for that. So it's not just about special ed. It's also CDF monies that schools that don't have vocational programs are receiving CDF money based upon the average.
I appreciate that, but and I understand that fully.
So there's a lot playing into this and where the money goes and how it gets distributed, and it's being taken away from us and going other places where they really don't have the students to generate that. And that's our big concern as superintendents, If they deserve the money, then they should get the money.
Well, I appreciate your comments and Superintendent White's willingness to get us a legal opinion, because there's two sides to each equation, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Yeah, okay, and I'm just trying to think this through. I think we can do the right thing on this if we allow at the next meeting and allow the staff and superintendent to look at what actual breakdown is, follow what the law says, and then if there's a determination at the next meeting as to what the individual schools should get, couldn't we make that decision? And even though we've made the last payment, I guess I'm asking for clarification, even though we've made the last MFP payment to the schools, if in fact a school should get $5,000 more than they did or $500, we could do that in the August meeting and address what the stakeholders are asking us to do.
Here's what I would say. I think we're assuming there's a greater level of discretion, and I know maybe I'm not hearing you correctly, Ms. Smith, but then there is. There is no discretion. You have passed a formula. The State Department just puts out money according to formula. Now, what I think Mr. Fleming is saying is we haven't done that in the past. He's saying we've not abided by the formula. I think he's wrong. But that's not an issue of any disagreement philosophically between us. We all agree with this law. In fact, Mr. Fleming will recall that I was the one who, at the exact seat where Mr. Richard is sitting, led the discussion of why we should go to a fully differentiated funding formula for the special ed, and I was not backed by the school board or the superintendents in doing that. So I'm with you. The question is just, what does this formula tell us to do? The formula is just a roadmap for how we distribute the dollars. I believe it is changed by this law. I will give you a legal opinion as to how the roadmap is changed by virtue of this law, and then we have to follow it. But I don't think we should get into a protracted debate about intention. The intention is to do exactly what Senator Claytor's bill seeks, or by what options we have. We have no options other than just to follow the formula, and we'll do both. I will tell you in a legal memo how those two things come together by Friday. And if there's any, and I agree with Ms. Smith, if you have further questions or want to discuss it, of course you can do that with me individually, or we can have an item at the next meeting as to how those laws work together.
Mr. President, may I?
No, I'm gonna move forward if I can. I appreciate your comments. We got another speaker. I know Dr. Beebe wants to be recognized. I'm gonna recognize Dr. Beebe, and I'm gonna ask our other speaker, Ms. Brooks, to come forward.
She's there. So I may.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
So may I speak at this time?
Yeah, you can speak, yes.
Okay. Not to belabor this, but I think we need to, I mean, if it is the intent of the MFP, and Superintendent White, you asked the question, would it be retroactive? And I know you're seeking legal guidance, but it would appear that if it is, regardless of Senator Claytor's bill, I think it just affirms, as I can appreciate it, affirms that this is what the formula says and this is how we proceed. I think we do have a responsibility to make the payment retroactive.
Again, I don't, as a matter of policy, I don't think what any one of us thinks is at issue. I think we all agree that this chart should be rectified. If there's one thing that we all have learned over the last several years, it's that the MFP is an extremely complicated legal instrument. The relationship that this board has to the legislature, that the Constitution gives, the idea that it is perpetually in existence until another one is passed, those make it a very unique instrument. Let's not mess with issues of constitutional and legal construction. Let's get a legal opinion as to the passage of this statute and how it affects the formula, and let's abide by that legal opinion. I will tell you that any further discussion of this issue as a matter of policy, and any attempt to even enact policy rather than just following the law, puts you in a real position of litigation and a risk of litigation. Because remember, for every winner in the MFP, there's a loser in the MFP, and losers are perpetually taking their case to court. So I would just urge us to abide by what the law and the lawyers tell us to do. I will send you a memo. And I don't know that any other comments to any effect in this case much matter.
I will give Ms. Brooks opportunity because she turned in a card. Ms. Brooks.
Okay, thank you. I'm Veronica Brooks, outgoing policy director for the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. I just wanted to come up and let you know that just as the gentleman next to me stated, we are also in support of SB 267. The Charter School Association has always been a big supporter of money following children in a transparent manner. That's why in Orleans, for example, we've worked so hard with the RSC and with Orleans Parish School Board to come up with a funding formula that actually is even more weighted and differentiated than the states. Just a few factual things. One, I would just want to point out that the Orleans number that you have in front of you, it hasn't always been made clear, but after talking with OPSB, it is clear to us that number also includes not only payments going to charter schools, but also non-public schools, so that number is actually slightly inflated. And then also, I just want to just point out that while districts have a little bit more flexibility, and I'm not saying that they have, you know, just this infinite amount of dollars, we know that that's not the case, but because they have a little more flexibility in terms of scale, it is very difficult for charter schools, especially single-site charter schools, to adjust budgets drastically. That's actually why during the legislative session we tried to get a year delay in effect for this particular bill. We were not successful in doing that, and we're okay with that because we think that, you know, again, this is probably the right direction for students, but it is going to be difficult, as is, for our charter schools to adjust their budgets and make sure that they are providing the best education possible for all students with the adjustment to the MFP that's going to happen in the coming school year. So to do anything retroactively, you know, I would just urge you to remember that for a lot of schools that could lead to even further cuts, even further layoffs, and not really being able to provide education at those particular schools like they would be able to, and would just encourage that, again, that you wait for a legal opinion before doing anything that would take place retroactively, but that we are supportive of the bill happening as it's supposed to, you know, in the coming school year.
Thank you for your comments. We do have a motion on the floor. Motion was by Mr. Garvey. It was seconded by Mr. Bofi. Any further comment? Is there an objection to that motion? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
And then we need to clear the legislative report motion off the table. Just a motion to receive.
So moved.
Motion by, is that Dr. Beebe or is that Dr. Bofi? Got two? I don't know who it was, but I'm going to give it to Dr. Beebe and Mr. Gio. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is item 6.3, Committee of the Whole RSD Matters Only, Administration and Finance Committee. Mr. Garvey.
Yes, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole Administration and Finance Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 11.
There's a motion made by Mr. Garvey. It's seconded by Ms. Bradford. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item, 6.4, Committee of the Whole RSD Matters Only, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee. Mr. Garvey.
Yes, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I move approval of motion 1.
There's a motion by Mr. Garvey, seconded by Ms. Bradford. Any discussion on the item? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item, 6.5, Educator Effectiveness Committee. Ms. Orange Jones.
On behalf of the Educator Effectiveness Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 10, noting that motion 5 is a notice of intent.
There's a motion by Ms. Orange Jones, second by Dr. Morandi. Any discussion on the item? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
6.6, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee. Mr. Garvey.
On behalf of the School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I move approval of motions 1 and 2.
There's a motion by Mr. Garvey, second by Ms. Harris. Any discussion on the item? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
7.1, Receive Non-Public School Council Report and Tentative Agenda.
Motion by Dr. Moraney for receipt, and seconded by Mr. Gio. Any discussion? Any objection? Next item.
7.2, Superintendent's Advisory Council, receive the minutes and tentative agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Bophy, second by Ms. Smith. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
That concludes your agenda.
Thank you all. Ms. Smith, did you have a comment?
Please, thank you. I just wanted, we didn't discuss this at length today, but we did yesterday, but I just want to express my appreciation, and I look forward to the review panel that's going to be looking at the standards, and I just want to make it a public statement that I think we have some stellar educators on there and stakeholders well represented. I think it's going to be a great review. I look forward to that process beginning in July. I feel sure that we're going to make it known across the state and in the congressional districts when those hearings are going to be heard. And again, I appreciate the work and the help on all of that. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any further comment? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you for your work.